Well, let me begin this evening by welcoming all of you to Francis Marion University. It's a terrific evening, and it's a wonderful event that we're celebrating here beginning this evening. My name is Fred Carter, and I'm the president of Francis Marion University, and I'm also a professor of political science. Now, I provide you both of those titles because this is one of those unique opportunities where I'm privileged to appear in both roles. Tonight marks the inaugural public event of the Governor Robert E. McNair Center. It will be a two-day symposium which will focus most appropriately on the education and leadership legacy of Governor McNair, not just during his administration, but most important for Governor McNair, many of those wonderful things he did during the remainder of his life. Bob McNair was an extraordinary South Carolinian. He was an extraordinary and exceptional governor. But you know, the truly intriguing aspect of the McNair administration involves gauging the substance of the man as he managed a time of explosive growth in executive authority and power against the backdrop of one of the most turbulent periods in South Carolina history. It was a recipe for realizing one of two outcomes: progressive and moderate change, or absolute and total catastrophe. Well, we all know how it turned out. And the next 2 days, hopefully, will allow us to better understand why it turned out that way. You know, as a political scientist, I'm excited by the distinguished academicians and practitioners that will be participating in this symposium over the next 2 days. Tonight's keynote speaker, whom I'll introduce in just a couple of minutes, Governor Jim Hodges, Judge Matthew Perry, Professor Merle Black, and gentlemen, please note that I've introduced the two of you alphabetically, although in truth, Earl was my professor. Dr. Eddie Dyer, Mr. Phil Gross, Dr. Kalana Hendricks, and of course the directors of the center, Professor Scott Kaufman and Professor Alyssa Waters. All in all, a superb assemblage of speakers that we'll hear from over the next 2 days. And of course, we're always delighted that members of the McNair family are in attendance. Corrine, Robin, and Judy, we welcome each of you, and we welcome the grandchildren. We'll have a special recognition for the family tomorrow at the luncheon, but I would ask that all members of the McNair family stand now so that we can acknowledge our appreciation for your attendance this evening. Now, let me take a personal moment and acknowledge the presence of one other very important person here this evening. The McNair Center and the McNair Scholars Program would not exist if it were not for a generous lead gift from the SARS Foundation. This gift came about as a result of the strong advocacy and very passionate commitment from the chairman of the SARS board, Jim Kondouris. As many of you know, Jim served on the senior staff of Governor McNair and was, for a substantial number of years, the managing partner of the McNair firm. Perhaps more important to the event this evening, Jim believes strongly in the viability of the PD region. He also believes strongly in the criticality of educating the children of the PD. He's been a tireless supporter of this university, and he's been my dear personal friend for over 2 decades. Similarly, we are deeply appreciative of Dwayne Corley, also a member of the SARS board, and also a former managing partner of the McNair firm. Jim and Wayne are with us this evening with their lovely wives, Kathy and Jackie. Please stand and let us express our appreciation for all the support that the SARS Foundation has provided to this university. Now, by the way, just between us, I've been told that Jim and the SARS board will announce another very substantial gift to the university in the near future. that'll be related to our diagnostic and preventive health programs across the PD. Jim has authorized me to tell you that this gift will approach 7 figures. But of course, we'll want to keep all of that to ourselves until we have the formal announcement after the first of the year. Jim, Wayne, thank you for that level of support and thank you for that commitment. And now for this evening's presentation. Our keynote speaker is unquestionably South Carolina's premier public historian. He was educated at Davidson University and the University of South Carolina. He is the director of the Institute for Southern Studies at USC. He's a Carolina Trustee Professor. He is the Claude Newfer Professor of Southern Studies. He's the George Washington Distinguished Professor of History, and he's a Louise Fry Scudder Professor of Liberal Arts. Virtually enough chairs to fill the stadium. He is the author of editor of more than a dozen books, most recently the South Carolina Encyclopedia and South Carolina History. He owns honorary degrees from Davidson College, the Citadel, Coker College, Newberry College, and Coastal Carolina. In 2001, he received the Distinguished Alumnus Award from USC, and in 2008 was inducted into the South Carolina Hall of Fame. He is married to Neela Danforth, my former colleague in Governor Campbell's office. They have 4 daughters and 5 grandchildren. Tonight he will speak on the topic of Robert McNair and the art of governance. Ladies and gentlemen, Walter Edgar.
Thank you very much, Fred. And this is an age of full disclosure. And of course, back during the Campbell administration, you hired Blease Graham and me to work with the governor on government reform. And that was one time that government was reformed, something got done. I'm delighted to be here to talk about Governor McNair, a longtime friend. But I'm not going to talk about so much the man himself because most of us here know that. What I want to do tonight is to sort of set the stage for really the whole symposium by, I looked at the audience and I sort of figured what would be here. Most of you weren't born when the events that led up to the McNair administration took place. This was a very turbulent time for the United States, the American South, and for our South Carolina. And so I think really to better understand South Carolina and the role that Robert Evander McNair played, we need to take a look at our state in that regional and national context. Let's look back even prior to the 1960s when Governor McNair was chair of the House Judiciary Committee and then became lieutenant governor and governor, a key player in the events of the state. It's 1954. The Supreme Court of the United States comes down with a decision called the Brown decision, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka. It declared that the historic doctrine of separate but equal was no longer the law of the land of the United States. Now, what is interesting about this decision is that in nearby Colleton County, Clarendon County, a young black veteran by the name of Mr. Briggs challenged segregation at the local level. And one of the cases that was bundled up, as federal courts often do, that led to this historic decision in 1954 was a South Carolinian. In fact, when that case was heard in federal court in Charleston, Judge Wadis Waring, a native South Carolinian, one of the 3 federal judges hearing that appeal, actually laid down what would become the mantra of the Brown decision, that is, segregation per se is unconstitutional. That was first heard here in South Carolina.